going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So the topic of this video is buyer beware. Stay tuned if you want to find out what we're talking about. Everyone's looking for a deal these days, whether it comes from Marketplace, swap meet, or even through a friend. People are trying to find the best bang for the buck. The way things cost today, I don't blame them. But there's some things that we need to talk about. I have a friend who has a friend, which makes him my friend. Michael bought a C4 transmission that he thought was rebuilt by a race builder, and no one really knew the history of this thing other than they thought that it had been prepped by this race transmission shop. And so my friend who knows him contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in taking a look at his C4 to see what he's working with, to see if it has the good parts inside of it like they thought that it had. And so that's what I did. I got in contact with Michael, went over to his house and picked the transmission up. And so let's take a look inside to show you what I found. Like I said, no one really knew the history of the transmission. This is a Ford C4. It is a pan-fill C4, which means the dipstick goes into the pan itself instead of the case. Has a bigger bell housing here. And some of the things that I noticed right away, and this is things that you're looking for if you're trying to get a C4, is seeing which servo's on it. This actually has a H servo, which is a really good thing. That's a good servo as compared to, say, an A servo or something like that. If you can find a C, H, or R, that's considered the best of the factory servos. But when I got the transmission home, I thought, first thing I noticed was the cork gasket protruding out past the gasket, and it looked fairly old. So this thing was supposedly fresh. Now, one of the things that you need to look for if you're buying a transmission used is trying to check the fluid in it, see what the fluid actually looks like. And when looking at the fluid in this, it had all been drained out for the most part. There was still some residue inside of it when I took it apart, but it had been drained. And I later found that that was to hide something. This is the pan that I took off, and you can see it's just got all kinds of crud in it, right? I mean, that's just nasty. And, you know, that was the first sign. Now, it does have what appears to be a hardened input shaft. You know, I'm not 100% sure. I can't scratch it. So I do believe that it is hardened. So I started tearing it apart, and believe it or not, the high gear clutches, or the directs, seem to be pretty decent. The one thing that I did notice is it had traditional type steels in the direct clutch pack, but the frictions actually look fairly good. No real hot spots to speak of on the steels, which that's a good thing. And then you get to the Ford clutch pack. The Ford clutch pack stays engaged most of the time. Well, actually, during all three gears. And when I took it apart to do some inspecting, I mean, someone had put choline steels in the Ford clutch pack, which normally people put cholines in the direct and regular steels in the Ford. But all kinds of hot spots. I don't know if it was set up too tight, but the clutches are burned in the Ford pack. And you know, I thought, man, this would make a good video, because if you're buying a transmission or something like that used, you really have no way of knowing what's inside the given transmission, or anything that you can't really see inside of, say an engine. But there are certain things that you need to be aware of and what to look for. Now, if someone is proclaiming that the unit has been rebuilt and it's fresh, the pan bolts shouldn't look like this right here. Okay? I mean, this thing looks, there's no evidence that this thing had been apart, you know, recently. I mean, it's covered in grease and gack. And like I said, I seen the gasket protruding there. And, you know, it's just got a lot of sludge on it. He did get it for a pretty decent deal, along with a quarter stick shifter. Even the band in it's burnt. But it's just a cheap flex band. The valve body, I'm assuming, is nothing special. So, you know, when you're doing this, luckily the planetary set and all of the internals was really good to work with. But, you know, being aware, like the tail housing bolts, I mean, you can tell that these things haven't been off in quite some time. You know, just simple things to look for when you're buying something used. And my recommendation is, you know, always try to know the history of the unit that you're actually buying. You know, I've said it in the past, there are certain things that I will not buy used because I've been bitten by it in the past. I will no longer buy used torque converters unless I know the person who has it, and I know the vehicle that it was in, and I know that it was a good unit. Because a lot of times, taking the case of this transmission here, it came with a converter, and Michael was asking me, should he run that converter? And I told him absolutely not after I found this, because you do not know what kind of trash is trapped into that converter. So if I rebuild this thing here and then put that old converter in it, guess what's going to happen to this transmission in just a few hundred miles? It's going to eat itself up with the debris that was actually in the converter. So the million-dollar question is, what are we going to do to fix this transmission? When it comes to Ford C4s, there's only one person that I personally trust. That's Dynamic Racing Transmissions. Harold Miller, he's really got the game going on C4s. Now, a lot of people may debate this because there's people out there who do this type of work, but Harold's customer service and his expertise on the C4 is second to none. So what we're going to do is I'm going to box up all of the parts, send them to him. He's going to modify the pump. He's going to fully rollerize the unit. He's going to fill up the kidney bean holes here, make this a solid drum. Make this compatible with a 6-pack or 6-clutch power pack unit, because that is the weak spot in a Ford C4, is not having enough friction surface in the direct clutches to hold in high gear. Going to, like I said, when you rollerize a C4, you know, you're eliminating heat. That's basically what you're doing. You're taking the thrust washers out of it, and it will make your fluid last longer because you're not getting copper or bronze in the fluid, and it'll have Torrington bearings throughout. So I'm pretty excited about this. Now, this unit is going in a really cool car, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you will see it on the channel up and coming. Michael is actually going to dyno his engine. It's a small block stroker Ford, and we're thinking it's going to be close to 500 horsepower. It was built by my other good buddy, Eric Hester of M&E Engine Services up in Shelby, North Carolina. We're trying to get it arranged with Dennis over at the Race Engine Challenge Dyno. That's where I dynoed Project Mixed Up Balls. So hopefully you'll get footage of all of that as well. But for now, I've got to get this stuff boxed up, get it sent to Harold so that he can work his magic and I can assemble this thing and it will live a long, healthy life in his ultimate street strip car. It's going to be pretty cool. So until next time, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage. I will catch you later.